Exactly. You have to have the work ethic. You have to have the vision. You have to have the drive. And you have to make sacrifices and understand that you're not going to be perfect and you're going to make mistakes. But it is the road of hard knocks. It's things that we learn through the journey. It doesn't just happen overnight. You can't really, you were talking about people on the internet and stuff. You can't learn a lot of this. You have to experience it, learn the hard way, doing it a different way.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Kronos Group Podcast. I am your host, Jerry Brazie. Got a great guest with me today, Scott Edwards. You guys are going to like this guy. This should be interesting. Let me tell you a little bit about him before we get started. Scott opened up his first construction company at 17, and by 24, he was running a chain of comedy clubs. Yeah, this is going to be wild. As I hope I got this right. He'll correct me if I've missed any part of this. At different points, he's operated 3 different comedy clubs, 2 restaurants, a jazz club, art galleries, a travel agency, an insurance brokerage, and I don't know that this is a story, a submarine in Monterey for tourist beach shack in Hawaii. I almost couldn't read that. Yeah, an actual submarine, it said. He's retired now, at least from traditional business, and he's still very much, though, in the game. It appears he runs 3 audio podcasts and a video podcast. Clearly, he's got a bunch of stories about risk and reinvention, failure, trusting yourself, especially when the math doesn't add up. Survived bankruptcies, so we know he's got good stories and he's been in the game. Built businesses without big marketing budgets. Learned firsthand that entrepreneurship, man, is this true, isn't about hype. It's about the ability to survive and be resilient. So I think this is going to be a fun one. Scott, man, I really appreciate you coming on. Glad to have you here.
I can't wait to hear this guy. He sounds amazing.
Yeah, let's. That's a lot. That's a buildup. I put the pressure on you. Let's go with the obvious entry point here before we get into it, and just give us, kind of pre-17. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you come from? Kind of what's your background there as a teenager growing up?
Well, Jerry, ladies and gentlemen, I am so proud to be a part of the Kronos Group Podcast. This is so exciting. That buildup was a little too much, but yes, I'm R. Scott Edwards. Thank you. Settle down. It's not that big a deal. Those in the back, take a seat. Good. Nice to be here. Yes, I am a crazy entrepreneur, very eclectic in what I've done. It's so funny to hear someone say it. It's just been my life. I didn't really obviously map it out. It just kind of happened. I'm a Northern California boy. I was born in Berkeley, California, partially raised in Fremont, a small town south of the Bay Area. And the last, 50, 60 years, been in the Sacramento Valley, where I'm happy to own a home, have a lovely wife, and be living the dream as a retired entrepreneur.
So, growing up in California, how'd you make your way over to Hawaii? Let's just start with that most obvious question.
Well, and you alluded to the submarine in Hawaii, the beach shack. And in my successful life in the money was fairly available, and I was doing a lot of different projects. You name dropped several of them, and I was a little flush at the time. I had invested in a company called Snuba, and if you've traveled the world at all, it's basically a tourist company that does underwater snorkeling. There's you're underwater, but you're tied to a raft about 25 feet under. But if you like to snorkel and don't have a license to scuba, Snuba was the thing. You could see the fish and everything very clearly. I was an early investor with those guys, and they were very sharp entrepreneurs. And at one point, they built a tourist submarine and asked me to come out and help them finish it in Hawaii. And I flew out and was in there putting in ballast and helping them set up the interior and stuff. And I thought, I think I want one of these, and ended up buying a submarine, which we could talk about later. But the start of the question was, how did I get there? On my early successful days, I liked Hawaii. I would go over and visit for a week a year, and I think I've been every year for about 36 years. I love the Big Island. I've been to all the islands, but the Big Island is kind of a second home to me. And this company that I was just talking about flew me over to help launch their submarine. I ended up buying one of those, putting it in Monterey. But then a opportunity came up to buy into a beach shack on the at the King Kamehameha Hotel in Kona, Hawaii, and I bought into that and was an owner of that for about 6 years. And so it was the constant, started off as a tourist and then made some friends, started doing some business, and then opened up a company and did this. I mean, it was a transitional graduate of involvement in the Hawaiian business world. And it is, you know, it got me out of California. You know, all my companies were in Northern California. This got me out of the state, which was, it's always nice.
The majority of the audience is going to be entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs adjacent, people that are kind of chasing after that thing or interested in hearing about it and success. So in that context, as you jump to, I always say that if you are comfortable, you're living the wrong life. You got to live uncomfortable. And so, as an example, move to Hawaii when you grow up in California, kind of see what you can do out there. But where does that bug come from that had you chasing as opposed to being the 9 to 5, right? Where, I mean, did you have somebody in your life? Was your dad an entrepreneur? Did you have a mentor? Where's it come from?
Getting fired from every job I ever had. If
Okay.
you start off young, so I'm sorry, I should give you the foundation. My folks divorced when I was 10. I was working from age 10 on. I was doing paper routes, mowing lawns, babysitting, whatever to help my mom get by. And I started getting jobs when I was young, mostly pizza parlors, but I worked in a couple hardware stores and stuff. And that all helped build my foundation for interactive education and dealing with customers. And at age 17, I was the night janitor at a small motel. And that, you know, I'm cleaning toilets, mopping floors, fixing people's TVs. And I was hiding out from the boss in the bar, and I overheard two guys talking about, one guy was telling his buddy, you know, I make some good side money by painting lines in parking lots, called striping. And I'm 17 and I hate my job. And I'd already been through a few, as I said, getting fired. And I just thought I could do that. It didn't sound, you know, I didn't have any experience, never done anything with my hands, but I thought, you know, I could do that. And so I quit my job and I did my research. And here's something that's so important, Jerry. My whole life, before I jump into some new business, I like to know what I'm doing. And so I went to the Yellow Pages, and everybody that's under 50, that was a really thick book that had list of companies and you could contact them. So I went to the Yellow Pages and I found the largest striping company in my area, and I just dropped in and was able to schmooze the gatekeeper, let me talk to the owner. And people are proud of their businesses and like to talk about their successes. And I just sat this guy down and, you know, hey, how'd you get started? Where do you get your paint? What do you charge your customers? What seems important? And I was a 17-year-old kid. He wasn't intimidated by me. So he shared a bunch of great information. And I went back and I started the company called A&A Restripe. Now, Jerry, here's your first quiz. Why was it A&A Restripe?
Yeah, so I'm assuming there was a restripe, and you wanted to be in front of them in the phone book?
Back in the day, the only advertising that was free was in the phone book, and if you were A&A, you were on the top of the list. Yes,
That's right.
Exactly. I'm sorry. Jerry wins.
Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah. You just dated me. Thank you.
Anyway, I didn't have any money, but I had this idea and I knew what I wanted to do. And a buddy of mine had just come into an inheritance of $500. And I convinced him to use that to buy a paint machine so I could paint lines in parking lots. And then we realized we had no way to get this paint machine and the paint to the various jobs. So another high school buddy of mine happened to own a van. So the three of us formed this company, A&A Restripe. I was the face of the company, went out and did the sales. And then the three of us would go to job sites. We did all the McDonald's in Northern California. We did Safeway stores. We did an airport. We did a lot of striping all over. And that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial career. After about 2.5 years, I sold out, and the guy that owned the van kept that company and ran it. It's still operating today, but now his children run it. So interesting story there.
The older I'm 57 years old, the older I get, the more amazed I am at how many connections and similar experiences people have. This is an absolute true story. My nephew, who is 28, comes to me he was just on my podcast on Thursday night, as a matter of fact, the podcast we just released. So anybody can go back and watch that and hear this. But literally, Scott, he said he's looking at a business striping parking lots. What do I know about it? What do I think? 100% a true story. And if you go and watch the podcast, the advice I gave him is essentially what you just said. Go get it. Go ask questions. People love talking about their business. In this case, I told him, go work for them for a while, right?
Not
Go
bad
see,
advice.
learn the business inside and out. No reason for you to take all the risk and have to have such a steep learning curve. See what he tells you, and then decide for yourself if that's something that you want to go out and do. So it's a small world, and that's crazy. Let me ask you, though, how did you secure the accounts? This is a question everybody's going to ask, even way back in the day when it's a way different world reaching out to people than it was back then. How did you get the McDonald's and I forget your other customers, the Safeways or whatever it was?
The grocery store and furniture stores, and we did 7-Elevens and stuff. So here's a little bit more of the background. You were asking if my father was an influence, and the answer is yes and no. My father was a traveling salesman, and I'm considered pretty outgoing, but he was over and above gregarious personality that could talk to anybody, always had a joke ready. He was a salesman. And I don't know if it was genetic or just being around him, but I have the ability and have trained over the years that I can talk to anybody, make a conversation with anybody, and there is no fear factor, which is difficult to get over. I mean, there's been many a times, Jerry, that I've sat in the car as I was an insurance brokerage last, waiting to go into a business, and you still feel some intrepidation about going in and talking to strangers and trying to get them to open up about their needs. But that is the secret. You have to be able to approach people, be human, and be able to talk to them. And it's not just talk, by the way. Here's a little first tip. Listen. You have to not only have the right questions, but you have to be able to shut up and listen so that you understand the customer's needs, or in a relationship, what your partner needs are, and then be able to react to them and respond to them properly. So to answer your question, when I said I was the face of the company, I would personally go door to door, B2B, businesses, and ask them if they'd like their parking lot striped. And it was $1 a stripe in those days. And once they said yes, I would write up a single page, literally one-page contract, and we would set a date to come in and do it, and that was it. The other two guys, one just drove the van, and the three of us went out and physically did the striping early in the morning. You have to do it really early so you don't interrupt their business. But it was me going door to door and getting over the fear of walking in cold and starting a conversation and building a relationship.
And that's I think most entrepreneurs have that same beginning experience, but you're starting to freak me out a little bit. Did you just say shut up and listen?
Yes.
So anybody that has followed me now over the years will know that one of the epiphanies I had that put me where I am, I was sitting in a business at 28 years old that I was running for another person. I had grown that business from $1 million to $5 million. I knew everything there was to know about operations of a business, and I got a packet in the mail of a group that wanted to finance me to go start another business. And in that, a competing business, I had gotten some notoriety for my ability to do the job and do the work. And the packet shows up, and it's a pro forma, and it's a balance sheet, it's a P&L. And I didn't know what I was looking at. I knew operations, but I didn't know the other side of business, and I didn't know what I was looking at. And I was 28 years old, and I had a brand new son, my first child, at home. So kind of I was perfect for this epiphany that hit me. And I've given this advice out 5,000 times if I've given it one time because it works so much for me. And the advice and the epiphany I had sitting there in that little office was simple. Shut up and listen. I swear to God, I've said that 5,000 times. Shut up and listen. And I took that to heart. It said to me, shut up and listen. If you don't, you're going to be doing the same thing when you're 50 that you're doing now. I was 28 at the time. And I got rid of all of my friends that I had grown up with and anybody that I thought was holding me back. And I only went and found people, accountants and attorneys, people that were smarter than me, put myself in really uncomfortable situations, living the mantra of shut up and listen. And my career skyrocketed when I got rid of the thoughts in my own head and started not only listening, but I mean in-depth listening, making the conscious effort to not have thoughts while someone was talking so that I could hear what they were saying. And most of the people talking to me were in their 40s and 50s and had all the experience that I wanted, but I simply didn't have.
Well, and you also touch on something else that's so important for young entrepreneurs is there's nothing embarrassing about accepting the fact that there's others that are smarter than you or that have more experience than you.
That's right.
And in all of the companies and all the research and every company I open, and there's been over a dozen, I went and spoke to people that were already doing it. And I would ask the right questions and then shut up and listen, as you said, is so important. But then surround myself with those people. If I found somebody, when I owned a business and I found somebody that could run a restaurant better than me or could cook better than me or an accountant that could manage money, which I was not great at, better than me, bring them into your fold. And you are still the entrepreneur. You are still the decision maker. You still have the responsibility of success or failure, and both happen when you're an entrepreneur. But if you surround yourself with people that care as much as you and know as much or more than you, that, as they say, rising water lifts all boats. Everybody, including the company, does better.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that 100%. And the what I didn't know helped me become an entrepreneur and get into business, because I don't think if anybody had any sense about what they're about to go through starting a business, particularly from scratch, I think you'll agree, none of us would do it. But that ignorance is what helped pushes you, combining that naivete and that innocence and that ignorance with a work ethic and then the ability to listen. Now you're giving yourself a much better shot in a world where failure is, I don't know, what's got to be 80%,
Common.
90%.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something that is so important that people can't just glaze over, and that is the term and the work ethic. Anyone that's going to succeed in business, or even if you fail, but doing your own thing, you have to be committed to what you're doing. You have to have a work ethic. You have to want to get out of bed and jump into work because you can't wait to see what you can create or you can do that day. There has to be an energy. A lot of people commonly call it an A personality, where you're just, what's next? What do I need to get done? I'm a firm believer of to-do list. I get up every day, either in my mind or on paper. It's better on paper. Say, these are the 3 things I'm going to accomplish today, and you make sure you accomplish them. And if you don't, that's the top of your list for the next day. You have to be somewhat challenge yourself mentally and organizationally to jump into each day, use that work ethic to produce whatever, in my case, it could be striping to comedy to insurance sales, car sales, whatever. My life's been very bizarre, but whatever it is that day, you have to be fully committed and be, jumping out of bed, ready to do it. And sadly, there's a lot of the population that is happy to run down to the state or county office, put their 8 hours in a cubicle and go home and have no responsibility. I don't know about you, Jerry, but there was many a nights I had trouble getting to sleep because I was worried about what was coming or what I was dealing with. And you can't walk away from it like an employee can. You have to be committed day in and day out.
Yeah, there were times where I was actually jealous of the employees or employees in general. And this is why I'm quick to make the distinction that the vast majority of the population are not cut out to be entrepreneurs. The social media today loves to tell kids that if you're a sucker, if you're working more than 4 hours a week, driving a Lamborghini, making 10 G's a month or 10 G's a week, right? That you're a sucker for not doing that, when we all know that this is why I say about 85% of everything I see on the internet relative to business is not true from again, my experience. And so I think that's absolutely true. And people need to understand that entrepreneurship, I see entrepreneurs in a lot of people. Whether or not they can be one is something completely different. But the vast majority of people should stay in the, or be number twos. There's nothing wrong with a number two. And the number two job is significantly different than a number one job. And there is nothing wrong with working a 9 to 5. That is honorable work. And people should embrace it if that's what's good for them. They just need to understand that you're capped somewhat in that environment. And if you want to try to get out and risk something and try to earn off of what you are actually capable of, there's a lot of pitfalls, but there's a lot of benefit.
Right. And the foundation of any successful business is the worker bees, the people that get the work done. You still need that entrepreneur or that CEO to set a path, to set guidelines, to train you or whatever, but you need good people. One of the things I was very successful at was because, again, you have to shut up and listen. When you interview somebody for a job, it's not so much what you're telling them, it's what you want to hear from their side. Why are they there? What's their goals? What's their thing? And what I would do is instill in everybody a sense of ownership that, when you're at work 8 hours a day, that's a big chunk of your life. It's like your second or third home. Treat it as such. You might be the CFO, but if you see garbage on the ground, pick it up. It's your home. See, if employee A sees employee C challenged with something, help them, because we're all in it for the success. They get paid because we're bringing in money from whatever we're doing. And if we don't do our jobs, all the worker bees, all of us together, you are not going to have the money to get paid and have a successful operation. And one of the things, I guess it's top down, examples for so in my case, and when I owned the comedy clubs, if we, somebody drank too much and got sick in the bathroom or something, we called it a yuck patrol. I was in there as much as any of the employees helping out and cleaning up. It wasn't like I stood up on my throne and said, do this and do that. I was in with the employees doing everything that they were doing. They would see me as the owner doing the same work that they had to do, and that builds a sense of family, sense of ownership in the operation. And then when the company is struggling, you sit down your staff, you tell them what's going on, and ask them, hey, what can we do to maybe make things better? But if the company's succeeding, you give out bonuses, you throw a party, or you do something, have them join in that celebration, and that all builds that sense of ownership. Whether it's a small construction company or a chain of comedy clubs with over 100 employees, you want them all invested in what they're doing. Sorry, I went off on a little.
No, yeah, you're exactly right, and it dovetails with what I have always said, which is, for me, I have done every job in every company I've ever owned. I won't do bathrooms. And so I bring somebody in to do the bathrooms. And I always have, even when I couldn't afford it, I brought somebody in to do the bathrooms because I hate cleaning bathrooms. But I never asked somebody else to do something that I wouldn't do. So I could do every job, but the one I wouldn't do, I brought somebody in. That doesn't mean I haven't cleaned a bathroom. I absolutely have. But my point being, as soon as I could, I started bringing people in rather than ask somebody else to do something that I wouldn't do. That's an important piece of advice for entrepreneurs to hear, that I always looked at it and thought, okay, I want to make sure that I'm at the level with the lowest guy, not the highest guy. If I can understand what's going on with the lowest guy on the totem pole, I'm going to do just fine. I don't have to worry about the guy at the top.
Well, and it's even a little broader than that, Jerry. And I mentioned it briefly there. If you want a strong company, it makes sense to sit down with your staff and ask them their opinions. That doesn't mean you're going to listen or going to change something necessarily, but you might pick up on something because they're in the trenches working with the customers or dealing with the clients or whatever, and they may pick up on something that you missed because you've moved beyond that or something, or you're not as involved. And so talking to your staff and treating them like that, they're involved in the success of the company can teach so much. And again, it is about bringing whether it's 3 employees or over 100 employees, you want to bring them on the journey. You want to get them to feel the excitement and be energized by your vision of the future. My sense of what I thought was success, I wanted them to all feel and see so we could get there together. I don't know. It sounds simple, but it's not. You really have to. There's so many things. Go ahead, Jerry.
No, that last sentence right there is perfect. In fact, it sounds simple, and people in social media will make it sound simple, typically trying to sell you something about how simple it is. But the reality is that it is really easy to say. It's almost impossible to do. And so I think that's an important message. I'm glad you finished with that last sentence, because that's just reality. Let me ask you. So I've bought and sold and built, I don't know, a dozen. I think I just started my 13th company. So somewhere around a dozen companies. You and I are of the same ilk. And so my first one I did really well with. It still operates today. It's done hundreds of millions of dollars over the last 25 years. But I went on to, in my case, businesses dovetailed. I bought a building because I didn't want to rent the building that my operating company was in. And then I had a transportation company. And so why buy gas from somebody else? I'll just buy gas stations. And from that went convenience stores and gas stations and car washes. And from that, developments and investments in housing. And I've gone on to do all sorts of things. But they were all kind of, in a way, I did a woodworking business, which was a complete failure. But for the most part, they kind of dovetailed off of one company or another. So that was kind of my story. What was yours that you didn't stop at one, and you didn't stop at one certain one, you kept doing different ones? What was the bug there that got you?
Mine was a little bit different story. Yours is much more organized and a path to success. I was, like a lot of entrepreneurs, more hit and miss. I was running the construction company, but it got to the point where it wasn't really making enough money for 3 of us. And so I sold out, and then I went and worked somewhere else until I got fired. But then, I went into this, going to talk about dating yourself. I was DJ. I was doing portable music parties, spinning records before disco came out. And it was just fun. I was young. I was 19, 20. And it was fun. We were doing weddings and bar mitzvahs and school parties and stuff. And you could meet a lot of girls. And we're doing these dance parties and spinning records. And it was just the next thing that just seemed like fun. And by the way, the guy that was my partner on that company, the guy that owned the van, he kept that company until he retired. So I'm 2 for 2 on companies I started surviving a long time. But for me, I would get anxious. I was always ready for the next adventure. And that's what I call these, my next adventure. So I did the striping company. I did the music company. And then when I was 23, I was selling life insurance for this small company out of Chicago. You may have heard of it, called Combined Insurance. And it was a B2B, door-to-door sales of policies of $12,000 to $5,000. And if you fell out of a plane, landed in a certain pine tree on a Tuesday, it paid. So a real reputable company. But it helped me break down doors, helped me talk to business owners. And I was doing that. And I didn't like it because I was, young, and you don't believe in life insurance when you're 23 and you're going to live forever. And I went on vacation down to Los Angeles. My dad, who had a great sense of humor, said, you got to go by this little place. It's called the Comedy Store. And they had a little satellite room by UCLA in Westwood. And I took my then girlfriend, soon to be wife, soon to be ex-wife, into this comedy club. And now this is before comedy was a thing. There was maybe, a half dozen clubs in the country. Nobody really talked about it, knew about it. Stand-up comedy used to be the entertainment between strippers and jazz bands. It was never a mainstream entertainment format. And I go into this club, and I was just blown away by the interactivity, the fun, and how it made you feel. I met Dave Coulier, Sandra Bernhardt, George Wallace, and I started what I do. I started talking to the comics. I talked to the waitresses, and I was like, just, wow, this is something that's just so different and so exciting and so fun. So on the 6-hour drive back from LA, in my head, I developed the whole company, what I was going to do, how I was going to make it work. Still, I didn't have any money, but I had the dream, I had the vision. And I came back and I quit my job and I went bankrupt because I didn't want any debt. Went back down to LA and did what I mentioned earlier. I talked to club owners, I talked to bookers, I talked to comics. What do you charge? How long are the sets? What do you need to do it? I investigated the clubs, you know. Then I came back to Sacramento and literally, Jerry, wheeled and dealed, because the biggest cost in a comedy club is the space, the location, right? If you do a lease, you have to pay 2 or 3 months up front. You have to have a background, which I didn't have in leasing and stuff. And like the 2 previous companies, they were just out of a van. So this is my first brick and mortar kind of situation. I wheeled and dealed and negotiated with a good restaurant that had a banquet room that wasn't being used 90% of the time. If you're a restaurateur, you know banquet rooms only get so much use. And I made a deal with the owner that he would get the food and the drink and I would get the door if I used his banquet room and converted it into a comedy club. Now, I had to do all the work. I had to tear down their banquets, set up my comedy club, work the door, bring in the customers, produce the show, and then after, break it all down so they could do a banquet the next day, right? So it was a lot of work, known. You have to be committed. You have to be willing to work hard. But I was 24, and that was the beginning of Laughs Unlimited, all comedy showroom in August of 1980. And I was very lucky because, again, by talking to Dave Coulier and Bob Saget, who introduced me to Gary Shandling, who introduced me to Jerry Seinfeld, who introduced me to Jay Leno, you start building a world around you in that comedy world. And I opened my club. The very first guy to hit the stage, it was his first road gig out of Phoenix, Arizona. His hometown was Gary Shandling.
Wow.
And a lot of people know Gary, done a lot of TV shows and movies, and a very, very funny guy. But he was the opening act. He made $150 for a week's work. And the headliner was George Wallace, who ended up having his own theater in Las Vegas for about 15, 20 years. So anyway, that was kind of how Laughs Unlimited came around. And that one other thing I wanted to share, Jerry, for your young entrepreneurs listening, is that you have to be versatile. You have to be able to learn about a lot of different things. And my example here is that if you open a comedy club, it's not just a stage with a microphone and a couple speakers and some lights. That's the show. Just in the show, you have to be able to get the people seated. You have to get them focused in the right place. You have to have the right sound, the right lighting, right? There's certain aspects to producing a show. But when you open a comedy club, guess what? You have to serve drinks. So now I'm a bar owner. So I have to learn about liquor cost and all that. Well, wait a minute. In Sacramento, if you're going to serve liquor, you have to serve food. So now I have a kitchen and I'm running a restaurant. So when I opened the comedy club, I didn't just open a showroom. I was opening a restaurant, bar, showroom, 3 real different aspects of business. And I had to learn and teach myself about each of them. And again, I did that by talking to people that already were successful. Hey, where do I get my food to sell the people? Where do I get my liquor to sell the people? What do you charge? If you're not inquisitive in sourcing out what you need, it makes it even harder. But I wanted to tell that story, Jerry, because it's not always a linear path. You have to be able to do different things, juggle a lot of different aspects to be a successful business owner.
No, this is the easiest interview, conversation, podcast I have ever had, because it's like I'm looking in the mirror, and here's why. Anybody that listens to me over the years is going to hear you saying exactly what I have been saying forever, and it is the biggest misnomer when it comes to starting a business, which is that you need money. Everybody spends all of the time trying to figure out where they're going to get the money, and I say that you'll plan on, trying to get every duck in a row, and then you'll turn around and be 50 and realize you've been trying to get your ducks in a row for 25 years. It just doesn't happen. You got to burn the ships and you got to go. It takes dedication. You can do a little bit of planning, but you'll plan yourself into oblivion. You'll be retired before you ever start. And so the biggest misnomer, the thing that isn't taught well enough, is that you can do things figure out what you want to do and then go find the money for it or the resources or the time. And don't discount how much effort can pay off. How much hard work
you
can pay off.
Wheel and deal. Yeah, you can wheel and deal a lot of things. You never know what's going to benefit. The guy that owned that restaurant that let me use his banquet room to get started, he didn't need me. He didn't need what I was bringing, but he saw that if I brought an extra 100 people in a night, he was going to sell drinks. He was going to sell food, and that would boost his bottom line. He was being totally selfish, but it was a win-win. There's ways to make things work. But Jerry, you're right on the point, is that nothing is easy. Everything is a challenge, and you don't need to follow these so-called gurus that are going to tell you how to succeed, because 10 times out of 10, that's going to fail. It really is your heart being committed to an idea and then making it happen come hell or high water. And money is actually not the hardest part at all.
Right.
I've done a lot with no money, and then once you're a success, people are, hey, what do you need money for?
Right. And it's one of those things where you don't want anyone to tell you no because you want to be committed to it, but at the same time, you have to learn to listen to advice that will have you do it a different way or do something else, right? It's a fine line between I'm going to chase my dream down, beat it over the head, and make it happen. It's another thing to be able to listen to advice from the outside that says, yeah, I wouldn't do that, or I wouldn't go that way, and here's all of the ways. It is a once you latch onto it, though, the point is, if you're going to go, it's deep end. There's none of this wading into the shallow end. You got to get on that high dive, and you got to jump in and just trust yourself.
Right. It leads me to two things. One, I was saying how you always ask for advice and listen to your staff and do this and that. That doesn't mean you change your idea or your plan. It's just good to have all those voices to help you formulate that vision, to formulate that plan to success. But the other thing we haven't talked about, Jerry, that's so important is you cannot be afraid to fail. Failures are the stepping stones to success. Emmett Stone said that once. It is so important to understand there's not an entrepreneur out there. Donald Trump is a great example that hasn't gone bankrupt, that hasn't failed. In my case, I owned a submarine and lost lots of money. It was fun. It was exciting. It was a quirky opportunity. It lasted 2.5 years, but I lost my ass. But I do things for fun. For me, being able to drive that submarine, own a submarine, and make it succeed for a couple of years, but ended up eventually losing and failing. It wasn't, the money didn't matter. I was doing what I wanted to do and I was having fun. And so, yeah, I lost my ass, but to me, it was worth it. The beach shack in Hawaii, that wasn't a big money maker. I think I broke even, maybe even lost a little bit, but for 5.5 years, I got to write off my flights and my stays in Hawaii. I would work the beach shack, and there's, semi-clad women lying on the beach that need towels and need sunscreen and want to rent kayaks and stuff, right? So it was fun. So here's something that's a little bit different, Jerry. You're a really serious, successful entrepreneur, and I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished. I went a little bit different path. All of my adventures were fun, things that I want to do. For example, when I was in the heyday of the 80s and money was pretty easily accessible, I get anxious. I opened a new business almost every 12 to 14 months. And the reason was I had an idea of what would be fun to do. And this is going to seem silly, but a lot of restaurant people know what I'm talking about. I have a secret barbecue sauce recipe that everybody raves about when they come to my house. So I opened up a barbecue restaurant, and I was
Mhm.
serving barbecue ribs and chicken and sharing my sauce and my secret to barbecue with the public. Another very successful business. It was called Sticky Fingers, and I was able to build it up, run it for several years, and then sell it for a profit. So that's the other thing, Jerry. I would build up a business and then sell it. Even my chain of comedy clubs, they're still running today, 45 years later, but I sold out after 21 years because I was ready for my next adventure.
Were you married this whole time? Any family while you were doing this?
Yes and no. And speaking of failures, I want to be honest. I failed as a husband and father, and I carry a lot of guilt about that. And it goes back to what I said early on when I was forced into being a provider at age 10, age 15, whatever you want to call it. Your focus is bringing in the money, success, and helping support the family. So I mentioned my girlfriend, soon to be ex-wife. We got married and I thought I was doing the right thing. She got pregnant. I wanted to be a father so bad. And I have my wonderful son who I can proudly say just this last March got his PhD and is teaching down at the University of San Diego. But I got married, had the child, and then I was off to work. I was working. When you're an entrepreneur, there's no 9 to 5, right?
Right.
I own nightclubs and restaurants. I would get up at the crack of noon. I'd be at work by 2, and I'd work until 2 or 3 in the morning. And there was no time to be a really good father. And in my mind, I was being a good provider, but that was probably just an excuse. I was just not a terrific husband or dad at the time. And that marriage only lasted 18 months. She was kind of there for the money. That's a whole nother story. But I always like to joke 18 months of marriage, 18 years of payments. But, I tried to stay connected with my children. The first wife wasn't really somebody I was in love with. I did wait until I was in my 40s to get remarried, and have been very happily married for over 32 years, but no kids. We missed that part. But I was always a part of my children's lives financially and tried to be there for Christmas and birthdays and stuff. But one of my failures I have to own is that I could have been a better dad. Husband, I wasn't in love with the first wife, so I don't have any guilt there. And my new wife appreciates, because I'm so in love with her, that all that years of missing out on something, she's quite spoiled, as they say.
Yeah,
But I don't mean financially. She's spoiled with love and attention.
yes, and I so appreciate and enjoy hearing that, even though as painful as that is. And it's as many things as we have in common. We came at it from completely different ways. I was born into abject poverty. I have 8 brothers and sisters. I've been beaten
Wow.
within an inch of my life more times than I can count. I've been shot. I've been stabbed. I've almost died more times than, like I said, I can count. And so I was living with hookers and heroin addicts at 17 years old in a flop house for $25 a week. I got my first job as an 11-year-old. I paid taxes in 1980 as an 11-year-old, and I've never not paid taxes since. So I was never going to have children because my older brothers and sisters, my next oldest sister was 7 years older than me, and then I have a little brother and a little sister, 9 kids total. And so I got to see the older kids go to jail and drugs and get pregnant and all of those things.
Wow.
Not that I avoided some of those things, but at least I had an idea that they were there. So I was never going to have kids. And then I met my wife at 28. We're still married, coming up on 30 years. And I have 3 fantastic kids. But the second my son was born, Scott, it changed my life. I mean, the one minute my wife is pregnant and I'm running this company, as I described to you already, and the next minute my son was born, and I was like, I got to go I got to do 2 things. I got to go split an atom, man. I got to go rip this country in half. I got to take over the world, because he will have a better life than I had. And then the flip side to it is I've now been married 30 years, and the way that I viewed my wife the second my son was born changed significantly also. So mine was about escaping where I came from, doing it with this just laser-like caveman focus that someone's got to go outside and hit a pterodactyl over the head and drag it back, or we're all going to starve. And then, whatever inconvenience I might experience along the way, I was more than happy to do it, because I was sacrificing on on behalf of my children. So again, two different ways, two different really conflicting stories, but at the same time, we kind of did the same things. We have a lot of the same lessons, and it just shows that there's different ways to go at it. I have the things that I regret too, but I'm happy to say, and when it comes to the children, they'll tell you I was home every 80% of the time to put them to bed. Kids are about quality time, not quantity time. And we would wrestle and go to bed, and I would ask them, what are you going to be when you grow up? And they'd say, whatever I want. And I'd say, how are you going to get there? And they would say, work hard and be smart. And they'll tell you this all these years later. And so my kids live here in town with me, and I'm very, very blessed. It just shows that there's two different ways to go at it. But the thing that you and I absolutely have in common is we're not afraid, and that was my next question, so you beat me to it. We're not afraid to lose. Bankruptcies, check that box. Come back, put your feet on the floor, keep fighting. So you're not afraid to lose. In order to lose, you got to risk. You're not afraid to lose. You're willing to put in the work, so you're willing to sacrifice. Regardless of how we come about it, you and I have those things in common to make these things work, and you're not going to get there as an entrepreneur without those things.
Exactly. You have to have the work ethic. You have to have the vision. You have to have the drive. And you have to make sacrifices and understand that you're not going to be perfect and you're going to make mistakes. But it is the road of hard knocks. It's things that we learn through the journey. It doesn't just happen overnight. You can't really, you were talking about people on the internet and stuff. You can't learn a lot of this. You have to experience it. I'm better at one thing because I learned the hard way doing it a different way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I made those mistakes. But before we go any farther, I just want to say that I'm proud of you, Jerry, for finding the balance between successful business person and father, because that is a challenge. Let's hear it for him, everybody. Good job. Good job. But go ahead.
My ability to do that, though, is rooted in the ability to imagine that I could be something far beyond a street kid living with hookers. And so that drive that said, I'm going to do this, well, they'll say, Jerry, you can't do this and do that. And I just, again, I couldn't do what I did. I couldn't do to escape the streets. So forget about starting a business at 28, being a millionaire at 33. And my companies we're coming up on $500 million in revenue. That's unimaginable. So if that's unimaginable, why is raising 3 good kids and having 2 in the military and a fantastic daughter and being married for 30 years, why is that unimaginable? So I just took that approach to it. I didn't listen to all of that. And I just said, no, just because you say it's so, it doesn't have to be. And that's really served me well as an entrepreneur, but in particular in my home life. Not to say that everything's been perfect. It never is, but I'm still here standing.
Well, and you made it happen because you made it important. I think what my challenge was, all of my businesses were night-based. And so when the kids were babies, I would spend time with them during the day. But once they were in school, by the time I got out of bed, they were already in school. And by the time they got home from school, I was gone. But I was only married 18 months. So I was the distant father anyway, and that makes it a little bit harder as well. But I was there for the ball games and I was there for the birthdays and stuff. But it just, the day in and day out, the marriage didn't work. So the father side didn't get the opportunity that sometimes I wish it had. I have a good relationship with my son and that's the most important thing to me. But
if
it is a path.
Go back and do it again, and this is, I think, instructive and reflective. You could have, looking back on it now, I'm going to assume this, you tell me if I'm wrong. If you could go back and do it again, even if the marriage broke up, right? Just the way that you interacted with your son, I'm assuming you could have found more time.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes, and it's interesting that we're talking about this because I'm a good Catholic boy. I still have guilt. And I really was committed to success in my business. And so I was there 7 nights a week, every night, doing the job, taking care of the customers, taking care of the employees, prepping before we open, closing after, all the, the other stuff nobody talks about, Jerry, is that when you own a restaurant or a nightclub or any business, yeah, there's the whole interaction with the customers and the sales and the business, but then after hours, you have the bookkeeping, you have to be dealing with insurance, you have to be paying taxes. There's a lot of work that nobody understands or sees on the surface. So while I was focused on that, if I could go back and change things, I would and this is a good tip for your entrepreneurs listening. You feel like have to be there 24/7, and the reality is you could make time. Like if I change things, instead of working 7 nights a week, I might have taken a Tuesday or Wednesday off, let somebody else run the operation, somebody I trust, and then spend that evening with my kids. If I even
Mhm.
did that one night a week, it
Mhm.
probably wouldn't have changed the success of, I know it wouldn't have changed the success of my company, but it might have changed my relationship with my children, or I would have less guilt now than I do if I'd
Mhm.
taken that time. So even though we want you to be focused, we want you to have a work ethic, we want you to pick a path and go after it, you have to be able to realize that that business can survive without, if you've done it well, any business can survive without you for several hours to a day, or to give you time to do the other important stuff, which is building relationships and family.
I think it is absolutely important that we had this conversation about this. And I appreciate you taking the time, because I am one of the things that my first answer, I was on a podcast with a 25-year-old kid out of London, and all of his buddies and him are graduating from college. They're going off to the financial districts in London and New York. And he had me come on the podcast because he wanted me to give some perspective to what they should expect or what they should be doing. And when he asked me what my secret to success is, what would I tell a 25-year-old Jerry? My answer to him was, go have children. He's like, he was looking for some sort of, this is how you
Right,
drive and
right.
this is what you go do. And I was like, no, no, no. My answer is go have children, because there is no, I would give up everything I have right now. I'd give up my fortune right now. I'd work 2 shifts at Taco Bell. If you could offer me this, Scott, with a snap of your fingers and say, Jerry, I can do it right now. You're going to be 25 years old. Your kids are going to be 2, 4, and 6, but you got to work double shifts at Taco Bell. Sign me up. I'll go do it right now. And I'll give up everything I have, because I can rebuild everything I have. I can never get back that time with my children. I can never get back the joy of having a children and being a father and feeling what that feels like. So I guess my message to him was, it's the supercharger for me. I used it as a supercharger. It changed my world having children. And I think that it can be that way for everybody. But more people need to hear your story and my story and realize that it doesn't have to be your story, as much as I hate to say that to you. But it just
Oh, no,
doesn't
no,
have to
no.
be your story.
I carry the guilt for a reason. So it's a dual-edged situation, Jerry, because having children, yes, can you want to find ways to spend time with them? That helps build you as a character. It helps make your life fuller and happier, full of love. However, it also, not however, it also gives you that much more reason for success. When you have
Yes.
children, you want to provide for them in the best possible way and make their lives as comfortable as possible. And that's another driving force towards success. So having children satisfies both of those.
Yeah, and it was for me. That's, you just described me exactly. I say that men need to live for something else, and we are at our best when we are living for something else, and that something else is children. It can't be a wife. It can't even be your parents or your brothers and sisters. It can't be a niece or a nephew. Your offspring. Not that you can't drive yourself to take care of those people. One of the examples I give all the time is, Jerry, it's too complicated. I can't do it. I said, if I go put a gun to your mother's head, and if you don't try to run a successful business over the next year, I'm going to pull the trigger. You tell me whether or not you could do that. Of course, the answer is, of course I could. Okay, so you could do it. You're just choosing not to. But when it comes to the children, men living for something beside themselves like their children, it takes you to a level that you can't imagine. All of a sudden, what seems impossible quickly becomes possible, because this little thing is so impossible.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to give you a duality about it, and that is, on the one side, that love that you have for a child. It's different than a wife or your family or whatever. A love for a child is just the greatest feeling, experience, valuable thing in your life that you'll ever have. But also, you want to provide for them and succeed for them. But I will tell your entrepreneurs that one of the benefits, now this is going to sound strange, Jerry, but one of the benefits of being a bad dad or not being a dad is that as a serial entrepreneur, I had failures and I had successes. And as you and I both talked about, you have to jump into the deep end and make things that people tell you aren't going to work. You have to make them work. There's a lot of risk. And I will say that not having children in my life and having them like daily, I mean, I had a son, but I wasn't involved daily, freed me a little bit to take those risks. And if I lost, it only affected me. Does that make sense? In
Mm-hmm.
other words, I may not have been as a successful entrepreneur because I may not have taken as much risk if I was worried about the failure affecting everybody. I felt free enough that, oh, I'm going to go try this, like owning a submarine or a beach shack or opening this business over here. Um, if I fail, it's going to affect my family. That I'd already taken care of them financially. I wasn't as engaged as I should have been. However, that also allowed me a little bit of freedom to fail even more so. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying that it's a thing.
I think that does make sense. I think that just looking at my own experiences, that I always say, if I could bottle up my experiences, both I say as a child and the way that I grew up, I am who I am in spite of where I come from and because of where I come from. Both
Exactly.
things are true at the same time. And some of the worst things that I went through that I survived, I look back on and thank God I went through that. I got stabbed with a 10-inch screwdriver in my back in a mugging one time. And I put the muggers down, and I had this crappy little apartment. I didn't even realize till I got into my 550,000-mile Datsun B210 with exhaust pouring through the rotted out floorboards to drive home that I had a screwdriver sticking out of my back, going that way down behind me, and I laid in a bathtub in this crappy little apartment that I had. It took me 6 hours to get it out on a Friday night, Saturday morning. I wasn't bleeding enough. I knew it didn't hit a vein. They were going for my liver. That's a different story. I turned to my left and started to my right because when I was 14, I went blind in my right eye. I got all kinds of stories. So instead of getting me in the liver, it went through and it stuck in the muscle, and I yanked it out. And so
Wow.
I know the point of that whole thing is for me, it was always, no matter what happens to me, I can come back. So I know what poor looks like. So having a good idea of what poor looks like almost emboldened me to say I can provide for my children at a level that was unimaginable to me, even if I fail at all of this, because I know what ugly looks like. That was really a big catalyst for me.
Yeah, that is true that our life's experiences help us become who we are. It really is the framing of our lives. And for me, my parents divorcing, I was out of the house and on my own at age 15. So I was having to kind of make my own way at a much younger age than most of my friends and
Mhm.
most of the people. But that led to I had a car before any of my friends. I had a job before any of my friends. By the way, I never went to college or had the advantage of school. I didn't have time or money for that. I was, the school of hard knocks that we talk about, just surviving every day and what are you going to do today to make your life better? That kind of beginning, yours is much more dramatic than mine, but still that kind of challenging beginning helped create who I became, which was somebody that had a good work ethic, had a lot of drive, and had a vision that I could be more than I was yesterday. And what am I going to do today? What's on my to-do list that's going to get me one step closer to my goals? And it's really, who we are. And we're talking to young entrepreneurs, and every one of them has a different life experience, and every one of them has a different foundation. But what you want to do is find out what in your past made you who you are and where's it going to take you. That's the other thing is you and I both have a past, but I don't think we dwell on it or look at it. We're looking forward. What are we going to do for our success? What are we going to do for our families? What are we going to do? A lot of people don't look at the exit. As an entrepreneur, when I started a business, I was already formulating in my head, how am I going to get out of it? What am
Mhm.
I going to build? Where am I going to take it? And at what point am I going to step away and profit from my work ethic, work equity and move on to my next adventure? But you should never get into something unless you have an exit plan. That's the bottom line is And that doesn't mean that your bottom line your exit plan might be, I'm going to stick in this job for 30 years, 40 years. That's an exit plan. This is going to be my career. I love what I'm doing. I'm going to do this for the next 25, 30 years. That's still a plan. You just have to be able to think ahead. This is going to sound horrible, Jerry, but there's a few generations behind us that everything's right here, right now. What am I going to do now to get some pleasure, to do this or that? They don't think about tomorrow. And I think that's one of the failures of our school educational system, is that you have to instill in young people that today is important, but tomorrow matters.
Yeah, I think that is exactly why I think you hit it on the head. Why I'm so quick to point out, particularly when I have somebody like you on, the similar experiences that we have in entrepreneurship, and that it is not simple and easy like right here shows you, like the screen shows you. So I appreciate that. Let's do this. We kind of, like I said, I told Scott and to the listeners, you've heard me say this before, I do research on every guest. I have a list of questions. I have a little speed round I put together. I don't think I've ever got to question 3. In fact, question 3 was about bankruptcy, and you beat me to it. So congratulations. We made it to
failures.
Yeah, 3 of the 5 or 6 questions I have. But let's do the speed round, because people seem to like this, and I always like this response. So real quick, as we go out here, the speed round is, Scott, give me just kind of the first thing that comes to mind. Don't think too much about it. Just give me the short, quick answer, and we'll get through these here. The riskiest decision you ever made that actually worked?
Opening the comedy clubs was very risky. It was something, yeah. The comedy clubs, going, because I had no restaurant experience, no nightclub experience. I just jumped in, and that was probably the riskiest thing I did, because I went bankrupt. I had no income, no debt. I was just a 24-year-old, 23 at the time, 23-year-old kid. What's next?
The business you learned the most from, even if it failed?
These are good questions. I opened a travel agency briefly. My wife, I've lived my dream. I wanted her to live hers. We opened a travel agency. We had it for 2.5 years. I should have closed it after 6 months. It was a huge failure. It was literally, we opened 3 weeks before 9/11 in the States. And so all the money was gone, and I was stubborn, and I knew, I had already been a success. I'll make it work. And that was a huge mistake.
One mistake you see young entrepreneurs repeating over and over again?
Overspending on the things that aren't as important. Yeah, I had a buddy reach out from Atlanta that wanted to open a restaurant, and he spent millions on decor and bringing in the top chef and trying to make everything perfect. And then he never opened. The COVID hit and things happened, and he gave up on his dream and walked away from it and lost millions. And I think that people worry too much about the peripherals. Figure out what your core business is. Go for that. You can always flourish it later.
I love it. The cheapest marketing tactic that outperformed your expectations?
Talking to people. It's so funny. People say, oh, I don't have the money to market. And I go, well, I used to make flyers and leave them at the gas station and leave them at the bank. And I carry business cards. Nobody uses business cards anymore, but they're a great, very low cost business tool. And now we have the internet and social media. You have an idea, you want to open a business, put it out there and see if it gets a reaction. There's a lot of free marketing that you can do. You don't have to spend a lot of money to reach the public. That might be a good short answer. You could do a lot more without money than you think.
I agree 100%. Last 2 questions, and they're the yin and the yang. What entrepreneurship took from you?
My ability to be the person that I think in my heart I wanted to be, but I was so focused on entrepreneurship, I let things like family and marriage, after my first failed marriage, which again was only 18 months, I didn't remarry until I was in my 40s. So I realized my mistake, and I didn't allow it to happen again until I was, a lot more foundation in my life.
The flip side of that, what did it give you being an entrepreneur?
I got to tell you, Jerry, I have had a fun exciting life. Everything I did, I thought would be fun, from spinning records, disco records before Saturday Night Fever came out, to providing comedy shows. I produced 3 TV series. I've been the host of several TV, radio, and stage shows. I've allowed myself to have fun with what I was doing. Even the submarine, which was a huge financial mistake, just bringing that, the joy of tourists being able to see under the ocean and see the pelagic fish and the sea lions and the sea otters through that submarine in Monterey, and then being able to say I owned a submarine and I drove it, and it was a successful business for a couple of years. It really wasn't, but on being an entrepreneur made my life fun and interesting. And while you're going through it, you're just living it. You're just, you have these visions and you want to succeed and you're trying different things. But now that I'm older and retired and looking back, I feel like I was the winner. And like you said, there's no offense to being a 9-to-5 worker at some business and building somebody else's success. But I particularly felt like I lived the life that, even though I made mistakes and have guilt on certain things, overall, I did okay.
That's
I'm not
fantastic.
rich or anything. I'm not rich or anything. My richness, my fulfillment of my life was what I accomplished and the fun I had doing it.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation. It really has. And to anybody listening to this, I want you to hear it. If you're feeling, let's say, boxed in where you are today, I want this to be a reminder to everybody. Scott's story is that you just start again, pivot, chase something wild if you're willing to trust yourself, pivot. It can be messy. It can be creative. It can be risky. Sometimes ridiculous, as Scott will attest to, and many times deeply, deeply human, which is some of the best parts about it. But, the best stories never come from anybody playing it safe, in my estimation. If you like Scott's story and you want to check him out more, you can do so by going to let me make sure I get this right, standupcomedyyourhostandmc.com. That's www.standupcomedyyourhostandmc. I'll link it in the show notes. Anybody wants to go in there and track down Scott and see what he has going on. Scott, as we go out, what would you like to tell the folks?
The name of that website is based on my audio podcast, Stand Up Comedy Host and MC, where I share the audio comedy from the 80s and 90s, all the guys I got to work with. I name dropped several in this show, but also I have the Stand Up Comedy Podcast Network, which allows you to see videos and a lot of different podcasts about comedy. But my newest adventure is a retiree. I went video. I was always 6.5, 7 years. I've been an audio podcaster. I just went video in March with the Tag Team Talent Podcast. That's the Tag Team Talent Podcast. If you like stand-up comedy, magic, ventriloquism, you'll love this show. Jerry, you guys are doing an awesome job. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's been a real pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, keep listening to this show, and Jerry, and you will become a wise person.
I appreciate that very much, Scott. Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.